The Holy Gospel according to John, the 13th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you will have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash, except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I think we can learn a lot about ourselves from the animal kingdom, especially when it comes to how they interact with one another in their social structures. So as I was getting ready for tonight, I started thinking about the dominance that is shown by certain species. But first, a disclaimer. I'm not an expert in the animal field, so I apologize if I'm not totally on target. But I started thinking about gorillas and apes for some reason, where it seems like the males who are in charge of their packs are the largest ones and the ones who can make the most noise when they beat on their chests and yell. They're the ones who will win in a fight and the ones you have to fight if you want to be a part of that group. Then my mind started thinking about peacocks. Maybe I need to take a trip to the zoo or something, I don't know. But with peacocks and with many other types of birds, it's less about dominance and more about trying to be the biggest and bestest so they can find themselves a mate. I mean, have you ever seen them trying to impress the ladybirds? I mean, what do? They stretch out all their feathers big and wide. They put on a show. Hey, look at me! Look how bright and beautiful my feathers are. But we also can't forget about some of those creatures whose response in the fight or flight scenario is flight. was thinking about turtles. I mean, some of them, yeah, they might snap at you or bite you, but mostly the response is to duck inside their shell and wait for the threat to pass. Those little potato bugs, do you have those around here? I haven't seen them in a while, but I used to poke them and they'd roll up in a little ball until they thought the coast was clear, then they'd scurry away. Same with armadillos, though I only seem to see those dead on the side of the road. I mean, we never seem too impressed with those types of animals because they don't fight back. They don't stand their ground when threatened. So I was thinking about all these animals when it comes to how we as humans tend to act and react, because we seem to get a lot of our social cues from the animal kingdom, right? We believe that power comes to us as human beings when we're the biggest and the most domineering in the crowd. I mean, think of the people who physically try to make their bodies bigger so that they can be the best. Our enjoyment in sports is watching them to see who comes out on top. It's usually the bigger and more domineering team. Our political discourse these days is less about listening to one another and more about talking over each other and trying to get rid of our opponents completely and being right. In workplaces, employees try to show off and impress the boss so they can get the attention and the promotion and the raises. Our social ranking is based on the brands that are written on our clothing or on the back of our vehicles. And when it comes to fight or flight, it's pretty much fight or lose. This world, our world, is about winning. Our world is about power. Our world is about dominance and who is on top and who, in the end, is the winner. But here we are, gathered tonight, in the midst of a story, in the midst of a week, in the midst of a whole season that tells us just the opposite. We hear about Jesus who, in the middle of supper, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, tied a towel around himself, and began to wash the disciples' feet. We hear the story of what we call Jesus' triumphant entry, where when we hear that, we start thinking about our royal servants blasting their shiny royal trumpets and the royalty entering the parade route in a beautiful horse-drawn carriage with ticker tape flying through the air and security guards and Secret Service standing guard. How's that for wrapping a whole bunch of millennia together in one image? But instead, what do we get in that triumphant entry? Jesus coming down the street on a donkey. Not a glorious giant stallion, not a beautiful black limousine, on a hee-haw donkey. A donkey that may have still been nursing her foal because this donkey had her colt along with her in the parade. We're gathered here together at the end of a season that culminates with betrayal, suffering, and death of our Savior. In what world does glory come out of washing someone's feet, or riding down into town on the back of a donkey, or suffering or death? What world, we ask? God's world. God's kingdom. Do you know what I have done to you? Asked Jesus. I have set you an example. You also should do as I have done to you. This is Jesus' upside-down world right here, where the last shall be first and the first shall be last, where the hungry will be fed, where the lowly will be lifted up, where those who humble themselves will be exalted. In a world where only the elite few will reach the top, this is good news, because we all have the ability to reach the bottom. I can't think of a more humbling posture than to wash someone's feet, right? You have to be down on the ground, on your hands and knees, to even begin to reach someone's feet. And then to touch their feet, those parts of your body that have been stuck in those stinky work boots and sweaty socks for so much of the day, or those bare feet that have picked up dirt from the world with every step they've taken. To touch them and to wash them, I mean, I've heard many of your fears around touching feet. It's too close. It's too intimate. We are not that good of friends. No way, no how. But friends, this is just where Jesus calls us. Both to have our feet washed by our Master and Teacher and Savior, but not just that, not just to have our feet washed, but to turn around and humble ourselves and wash another's feet. I'm sure I've told this story before, but when I led a group of high school youth to a summer camp for a week, we ended that last night around the campfire, and then with the other counselor and I washing the feet of the youth. Did you hear what I said? A week of summer camp, high school youth feet. No, none of them are here, I can say that. But the most incredible part about that whole experience was once we had finished and we had gone on to roasting marshmallows and making our s'mores, I happened to turn around and I saw all the kids coming towards me, carrying that bucket of water and that towel we had just used, and coming up to me and bending over and washing my feet without prompting. It was humbling. This is what we celebrate this week. Humble service. Dirty service. Stinky service. Intimate, uncomfortable service. Life-changing service. Service that shows one another love. Love, the love of a Savior who kneels down to wash our feet. The love of a Savior whose fanfare comes on the back of a donkey. The love of a Savior who will suffer and die so that we might have new life. That's what it takes to bring about this kingdom. By no means is this easy work, but it's a very different kind of not easy than trying to reach the top. Do you know what I've done to you? Said Jesus. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, and you have love, if you have love for one another. And through that service, God's kingdom will be among us, right here, right now. Thanks be to God.